amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello there, listeners. It's great to be back with you in my second series of Lots to Chat About. I'm delighted to say that today my guest is world record holder Bonnie Hancock. And wow, what an achiever she is. A professional Ironwoman by the age of 17, Bonnie has competed in 7 Nutri-Grain Ironwoman series and represented Australia in surf lifesaving. In 2022, she completed a grueling 12,700-kilometre journey around Australia, solo in an ocean ski, becoming the fastest ever paddler to circumnavigate the continent, the first Australian woman to circumnavigate the continent by paddle and the youngest person to do so. She also achieved a new world record for the longest 24-hour paddle, covering a distance of 235 kilometres. Bonnie is currently an ambassador for Gotcha for Life and a speaker on leadership and mental health. She is an accredited practicing dietitian with a passion for working alongside clients to look at holistic factors to achieve their best physical and mental health. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So tell me, and our listeners, how did you become a professional Ironwoman at the tender age of 17?
Absolutely. I have a really clear memory of being 12 years old. This was back in the beautiful little town of Sawtell in Coffs Harbour. It's a couple of hours south of the Gold Coast. My sister Courtney and I sitting there watching what was at the time the Meadow Lee series. That was the professional series. And Carla Gilbert, who was a household name back then, this was 2002, running around just absolutely dominating on this series and thinking, I want to be Carla. That was at 12 years old. And, 5 years later, I finished school at the age of 17. I packed up my car and moved to the Gold Coast with Courtney. It's the hub of surf life saving. And we chased that goal and we managed to get in the professional series the next year.
How wonderful. And you have competed in 7 Nutri-Grain Ironwoman series and represented Australia in surf lifesaving. So tell us more a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Over those 7 years, I was lucky enough to travel around the world racing in surf life-saving competitions. I was an Ironwoman at the start of the career, which involves a swim leg, a board leg and a ski leg. Right. And as I sort of got to my late 20s, I wanted a bit of a different challenge and switched to the specialist ski paddling, which is, I guess, similar to paddling a kayak, but out in the ocean. So over those years, close to a decade, I've been to Germany, Hawaii, raced in Mauritius, right around the world, and it's grueling training. It's 3 times a day usually. Absolutely. A mix of running in the soft sand under the beating sun there at Northcliffe on the Gold Coast. It was gym, ski paddling on the flat in the ocean, Mother Nature, just as much as any of your competitors. She can be your biggest opposition. So you've got to learn to master the surf. And that's what I love about surf life saving. It's not just being able to out-sprint or out-race those around you. It's actually being able to read the ocean and use that to your advantage.
Now, the most incredible feat, and actually having just listened to Bonnie and then going to talk about her incredible feat, I'm amazed that you've got such beautiful skin at the end of it all.
A bit of moisturiser has helped then, and certainly, which you'll get into, mid-2022, my skin wasn't quite in the best condition for a few reasons.
Well, when I was reading your book, I thought, oh gosh, she must have to cover her head from sort of head to toe because there's a lot of really hard elements, isn't there, out there?
The Australian sun is the harshest in the world, right? That UV rating. And, you race around the world in different places. It's just nowhere near the intensity of the Australian sun. And I certainly never really looked after my skin when I was younger. It's something as I get older, you start to see that sun damage. And, I've had a few things cut out of me that you go, I've really got to get onto it when I can. And big slip, slop, slap.
Exactly. A lot of that. You didn't just manage to complete this incredible voyage, but you became the very first Australian to do this and the youngest person to do it. Now, as I've said, I've read your amazing book, which I hope our listeners, and I'm sure our listeners, will get a copy of, whether it's a hard copy or Audible. It's called The Girl Who Touched the Stars. But to, for the listeners who haven't probably, or some may have read it, I just wanted to ask you a few more questions about the actual book. Why did you decide to do this?
That is a very good question. The why is the most common question. So I never grew up wanting to break a world record, even dabble in the area of ultra endurance. I was a sprinter as an Iron Woman. Our races are 10 to 15 minutes long. Mid-COVID 2020, I picked up a book from the library. I'm old school, give me a paperback. I love that. And I went in there and I selected 3 books, and on the bottom of that pile was a book called Fearless, and it was about Freya Hofmeister, the German woman who paddled around Australia in 2009. I'd never heard her story. It didn't really make the mainstream news. You know, it's quite a niche sport in paddling. I read that book from a chapter in. It was like this gut feeling, like a calling, like this is something I've got to do. And I hadn't had that feeling since I was 12 years old, wanting to be an Iron Woman. I got to the end of that book, I closed it, and I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to paddle around Australia. I looked at my husband and said, I think I'm going to do it. He didn't know what I was talking about. He didn't know I'd read this book. He said, what? I said, paddle around Australia. And he said, why don't you just do a little bit of research? It's a wonderful idea. He's from Mackay. He knows what's in the waters up north, you know.
Exactly.
Saltwater crocodiles inhabit a third of our coastline. I did 6 months of research, found out everything I could about the coastline, how remote it is up north, the huge seas at the bottom, the freezing cold, the great white sharks like the warm and the cold water. And eventually I closed my book. I'd written a list of why and why nots. The why nots was pages long, and I decided not to do the paddle. I thought it was too much, too risky.
I'm not surprised.
Right, absolutely. That very afternoon, I had a premonition of myself as an 80-year-old woman not having done the paddle, regretting it. And it was that fear of regret that made me go all in.
And did people think, oh, God, she's insane?
Absolutely.
Including your husband, I might add.
100%. I had hundreds of people telling me it couldn't be done. Physically, I'd need to paddle 80 to 100 kilometres a day. You know, this was through COVID. So the WA borders was sort of closing and opening again. When we actually took off or set off for the paddle, the WA Premier closed the borders. So a couple of weeks in, we had to make the really tough decision for Matt, my husband, to stay on land for the 8 months while I would head out to sea hundreds of kilometres to get that exemption. He managed to get that exemption and we were able to cross into the West Australia. But at different times, it looked like I might get to the bottom of the country and get turned around. It
was very touch and go, wasn't it, for a while when you were actually on your way?
Absolutely, you know. And at any given time, if any of our crew members got COVID and it spread, well, that's the end of the paddle. So there were so many challenges. And the other one was the financial barrier, which I think is probably one of the biggest challenges people would face in this. It cost over $250,000 to do this. We sold our cars. We had to beg, borrow and steal basically money leading in, and we could only raise half the money to get around. So we had to continue to raise sponsorship funds, which was really stressful.
And as you went?
As we went. So Matt was on land doing that. So, you know, I was paddling 100 kilometres, sometimes up to 200 kilometres a day physically, but they were facing their own challenges on land, you know.
And on the catamaran.
Catamaran.
Accompanied you.
Absolutely. Yes. So basically I had a core crew of 4 amazing men, my husband and 3 others, and that crew of 4 and we would link up with different catamarans as we went, different skippers, different crews.
All right.
So it was adjusting to different personalities. You know, skippers all, as you know, Rosemary, have a different style of how they operate. So there were all sorts of challenges, you know, logistically, financially, you know, different personalities having to kind of work together. And it wasn't just what I was facing in the water that was providing the challenge.
It's the mental as well. Yeah. But one of the first things you had to do was put on some weight.
Yeah.
Now, I know to most people, including me, that would be the most wonderful thing if somebody said, off you go now and eat to your heart's content, and you put on some weight. But why did you have to put on some weight? Tell our listeners. Yes.
I'm a dietitian, so I knew, I did some calculations. I knew that I wouldn't be able to meet the 6,000 calories a day or so that I'd be burning. I ended up putting 15 kilos on. I can tell you it was so much fun. Lots of croissants and donuts and all sorts of silly things. Absolutely delicious. But that was over 6 months. I ended up losing 15 kilos on this journey, and that weight gain essentially saved me in the cold waters down south when, you know, I lost 8 kilograms in 2 weeks across the Great Australian Bight. I held basically no food down from seasickness. So
you lived sort of on Nutella, I think, for a while.
I did at certain times. It was Nutella and ice cream and Milo. I was trying everything from smoothies to, fresh fruit and veggies, and my body just wouldn't hold anything fresh down. And it was really distressing as a dietitian, knowing what I needed to be putting into my body, but not being able to hold that down. So essentially the main source of fuel was the body fat that my body was burning, and I was able to keep going. So I'm so grateful that I did carry that extra weight leading in. These waters are...
Well, looking at you now, you wouldn't have been able to afford, to lose too much weight if you hadn't put it on. So it was a terrific thing. But yes, look, I can imagine you sitting out there on your ocean ski, imagining all these beautiful things you could be eating and having daydreams about it. But then when you did get back onto the catamaran, as you would at night, you wouldn't really necessarily be able to enjoy it and keep it down.
No, and it was... one of the things I really missed was just sitting there and enjoying a nice meal with my crew.
Yes.
And I would come on, they were beautiful. They would often wait for me to finish. It could be at 8 or 9 o'clock. We'd be trying to sit there and have dinner. Everything's getting flung around in the huge seas, as you know what that's like. And I would sit there and desperately try to hold this food down, and it was just no good. So I really missed just sitting around a table and chatting and eating a meal. And when we would get to the calm waters, that's the first thing we'd do. We'd enjoy a meal as a crew.
Lovely.
And it's just that social interaction, around food that you miss. So most of the time I was just eating on my ski when I could. It was coming back up, and the whole thing, it was distressing is the word I can think of.
It certainly would be. But how did you know which ocean ski to choose and which would be the best? And was it just one or two, or how many did you have for the whole trip?
It's actually a great question, and I was getting asked the same thing by a group of surf lifesavers at my club yesterday. They said, what ski did you paddle? And, did you paddle the same ski the whole around in the different conditions? So I packed 3 surf skis. The lightest ski is 8 kilograms. It's 45 centimetres across. It's carbon fibre. Very, very tricky to balance in. Very fast. That's what we race on. The second ski was 12 kilograms. It's an intermediate ski. It's easier to balance in. And the third one was 30 kilograms plastic. We packed that basically for the crocodiles up north. We wanted to be prepared to have a heavy craft, because I had to face a reality. If there is a chance of a crocodile attack and it does attack me, I've got more of a chance in a really big, heavy craft.
Yes.
I paddled the 8 kilogram carbon fibre ski for 12,000 kilometres of the 12,700. I tried the 30 kilogram ski. I felt like a sitting duck. It was way too slow. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
The only time I needed to change was down off a place called, where the big sharks are in South Australia. I always forget this.
I've actually got that, yes, in the Bight.
Just before the Bight in South Australia, Port Lincoln.
That's right,
It's known for great white sharks. I was 100 kilometres out to sea. So to give people perspective, it's 40 kilometres when you stand on the beach and look to the horizon.
Right.
I was paddling about 100 kilometres out to sea each day. That's no land in sight. So I'm on this tippy ski. I tried to get some food from the catamaran for lunch. I hit the back right side hull, the starboard hull, and I punctured the ski. I put a big hole in it. So off Port Lincoln, known for great white sharks, 100k out to sea, my boat starts sinking, my ski starts sinking. My crew is desperate trying to get back to me. They got back to me in time. We then had to switch and I had to use the intermediate ski. When we got to a nearby island, Matt had to come out with Ben on the jet ski, pick my light ski up, take it to land and get it fixed and bring it back out to us. So just these crazy stories, and it all comes back to the fact that my crew was there for me each time, no matter what happened. If it was punctured skis, shark sightings, crocodiles, it always came back to the fact I had this amazing group of people around me who were just willing to go above and beyond, even if that meant coming out on a jet ski, 40k out to sea to pick a ski up. Like it's just...
They were determined that you were going to do it, and they were going to be there to help you, which is wonderful. Yep. But besides all that, you did say in your book that loneliness was one of the hardest things. Although you were accompanied by your husband a lot of the time on the catamaran and whatever, a lot of it was just you and the ocean, wasn't it?
Absolutely. 16 to 18 hours a day of paddling. It's you on that ski. I had my headphones playing music, but there's only so much music can do. You crave this social interaction. And, it's something I've always taken for granted, being surrounded by people on land and having conversations, whether it's with our work colleagues, our family, strangers on the street. In the middle of the ocean, it's just you and the sound of the wind and the waves. And, sometimes you won't see marine life out there for a few weeks at a time. It's a squawk of a bird or maybe a flash of a fin you see. And you can't get close enough to the boat. As you know, it's too dangerous to sit next to a boat when the surf's big on this tiny little ski. So it would be you sitting out there all day just having to get yourself through. And, you do get incredibly lonely in a way that I never anticipated.
And your mind sort of plays all sorts of games. But you did say that even when you could get back to the catamaran and whatever and have conversations, it was very difficult to have a private conversation because I know, you're sort of shouting over the waves, aren't you, or whatever.
Absolutely. Yes. A 38-foot catamaran, there's only so many places to go to have a conversation. You try to go out on the front trampoline, your conversation can be heard by those, underneath. Yeah. You try to go out to the side and the wind's so strong you can't hear each other. It was really, really difficult. And what I always craved was just coming into, anchor at a nice island or a bay where you could actually head into the beach and go for a walk with someone and just get things off your chest and have these really awesome, meaningful conversations. That's what I missed. And, I really looked forward to those rare days off where I would get to talk to my crew in a way that was different to sitting on a ski and yelling above the wind. And they were the beautiful moments and the beautiful memories.
Now you're listening to What's to Chat About? I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is world record holder Bonnie Hancock. Now, Bonnie, you quote a great saying that I must admit I had never heard before. Comparisons is the thief of joy. It's such a true saying, isn't it? Not just in competitive sport like yours, but also in everyday life. I mean, how often do we compare ourselves to others and come up short? And yet everyone is so different.
Absolutely. And, that is such a wonderful quote that I did hold on to because I was on this ski and it's like that thing, like we think the grass is greener. I would look to my boat, I would see my crew on the boat and think, how much fun that must be to sit on that boat all day sailing. That looks beautiful. Yeah. I would be in so much pain. I couldn't lift my hands above my belly button. I had bulging discs from a couple of weeks in. All I wanted was to be on that catamaran. My crewmate Jamie, on a day off, said to me, he said, I look at you every day paddling on that ski and all I want is to be doing what you're doing.
Oh, really?
The freedom of just jumping off this boat, having time on my own and getting to enjoy the ocean in the way that you do.
Yes.
And that
careful what you wish for.
Right, exactly. It put things into perspective and I thought, right, this is my situation, self-inflicted. I've come up with this idea. All I can do is my best every day. And I think if we can take that into our own lives, we just have to do our best. And it's easy to look at those around us, to look at people achieving great things and want to be doing that. But, there's a flip side. You look at the Olympians, they tell those stories that are raw and real and what it took to get there. They tell stories about their down days and how they had to rely on their team to get through.
Exactly.
So in a world where things can be polished and filtered, it can be easy to fall into the trap of comparison. And we need to remind ourselves what we see is sometimes only ever a bit of an illusion. And, I absolutely really enjoyed those candid interviews from those athletes at the Olympics. And I thought they were very, very brave to admit, things weren't always sunshine and roses leading in. And,
exactly.
Anywhere worth going, there's often a bit of a checkered path to get there, you could say.
Well, social media is, I was going to talk about it a little bit later, but I'll bring it up now. It's a wonderful thing in some ways, but also it's a thief of joy, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's that comparison thing. And I think the thing that's tricky is, kids are jumping on social media from such a young age, the age of 10, and they're not sort of emotionally mature to recognise that, to look at a picture and identify that it's filtered.
Yes.
To identify that that's not the reality. There's been the lighting and the angles and the filters, and that can be a really dangerous thing. So it's important that we educate our kids to understand that. Whether we hold off on letting them have social media, that's obviously an individual choice.
It's a really hard question, isn't it? And as you say in your book, in the book, that you have obviously a very big social media followers.
Yeah.
Now, I know, having run a number of businesses over life, you can get 500 fabulous reviews and one bad one. What one do you concentrate on?
Absolutely. Isn't that true? It's so true. And what was interesting about the social media was to have 10,000 people following this journey, it was always the times where we would post the vulnerable stuff. We would post the raw, we would post the real. That's what got the most interaction. I had people saying, thank you for showing this side of the journey. For the first few months, we were showing the beautiful bays and the beaches and the stunning water and, me achieving these huge kilometres. We were, a couple of weeks ahead of the world record by the time we got to Victoria. Eventually, I said, we need to show the other side.
Exactly.
We just had this realisation that people want to see that, and starting to show, my hands where the top layer of skin basically had peeled off, to show at the end of the day my husband trying to get into my back with the massage gun as I'm wincing in pain, to actually show what it was taking to achieve that. That's when we really started getting the interaction on social media. I found that quite fascinating.
Right.
And it was just a lesson in the importance, I think, in sharing a story, actually sharing the different sides of the story, and
a real story.
A real story. And as I say, me standing there with my world record certificate and saying, how great am I did this, is wonderful, but people want to know what it took to get there. And that is the most rewarding part, to say we had to overcome this and that, but we did it together as a team.
And as you say in your book, diamonds are forged under pressure.
Absolutely right. And I kept telling myself that. And, I would see that quote on the wall at the age of 18 when I would run on the treadmill at the gym as an Iron Woman. Diamonds are forged under pressure. And back then it encouraged and motivated me to push myself that little bit harder. And it was the same on this trip, every wave that crashed into my ski, every time the near hypothermia, the weight loss, all of that, it was pressure in different forms. And I thought, if I can just find a way to keep going, that's going to be the difference in me getting this record, actually being able to even complete the paddle, but changing in a great way as a person and learning and adapting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What did you mainly eat? I know we talked about Nutella and things like that, but did you actually take food with you on the jet ski so you could nibble during the day? Yeah,
so the catamaran basically carried, as you know, we would provision the catamaran with fresh food. We got a red meat sponsorship from Bindery. They supply the red meat to Aldi. They were incredible. And so basically all of the things you'd eat as an athlete, big pasta dishes. If it was in the still waters before, I'd have a massive day of paddling, lots of really high quality meat sources, fresh veggies when we were on land. As you know, after a certain time, your fresh food goes. So then it was to the frozen goods. But we'd get really creative about getting calories in too. So soft textured foods like smoothies stayed down well. So we would pack into that coconut cream, butter, avocado. These really, fats are your highest source of calories, highest energy source. So my crew would have lots of fun in those smoothies, popping different things in, and then we would play a game where I would have to guess what was in the smoothie, and they would always put a really kind of random ingredient there, like a gummy bear or some Gatorade, and I would be tasting it, trying to figure out what it was. So they had lots of fun with those smoothies and playing that game.
Oh, terrific. Well, I'm sure we'll have to get you back at some stage in your role as a dietitian to help our listeners, who are hoping to achieve various things or just in normal everyday life. But now seeing seals obviously was a wonderful experience and whatever, but with every seal there's a possibility of a shark, isn't there? And I know when you were going through or up near Greenlee Island, isn't it? Yes, up in the Bight, that the seals were absolutely magnificent, but you were very nervous about there being sharks around.
Definitely, we've all seen those documentaries where you see the seal, it just absolutely get attacked by the shark. The shark just stalks it like prey, and The thing was, I would see these seals and see how fast they would swim.
Yes.
And that was what was scary. It made me realize how truly dangerous the great white sharks are, because these seals were like flashes in the water. And as you know, how fast the sharks catch them. So off Greenlee Island, just before we cross the Great Australian Bight, so it's a little island off of South Australia.
Right.
It's where we basically had lunch before we began our big crossing of the Bight. There were hundreds of seals, some baking on the rocks, swimming in the water.
Yes.
And my crew jumped in for a swim. And I tell you, they hit that water and you could hear their shrieks as they squealed and swam into the beach, because I think they looked around and saw how many seals were and they felt in immediate danger. The only time we saw a great white shark come up next to me was actually Western Australia, a little bit later in crossing the Bight, not in South Australia.
Yes.
But I am sure many times that there were sharks that came up and had probably a bit of a look at my ski, and maybe because it's 6 metres, thought the better of it and swam away.
Moved on.
Yeah.
Now, you arrived back to the Gold Coast, obviously to much media attention, cameras and camera crews and all of that. How did you cope with that? And have you had trouble settling down? Because I remember reading Kate Cotty's book, All at Sea on Land, when she came back from her amazing circumnavigation, and she found it difficult. Have you found it difficult, or did you sort of slot back in easily?
I think, it's such a great point that you make, and I had so many people in the last couple of weeks leading in saying, be careful of the low, be careful of the low that can happen when you get back. You've worked towards this tangible goal for 8 months. You've had this incredible crew around you. You've been on a high, as much as there's been challenges.
Yes.
I was so grateful for that advice, because I knew when I got back I had to stimulate my mind and keep physically active as well. What helped me, I was so lucky to get a call from Mermaid Beach Surf Club.
Right.
They asked me to start coaching the nippers.
Oh,
I never
lovely.
intended to return back to nipper coaching, but I said yes. I said yes because I had this feeling that it would be good to me, for me to connect with the community. Best decision I could have made, because I can tell you that 10-year-olds, as I say, they do not care that you've broken a world record. They keep you on your toes. So I got back into that routine of coaching as I adjusted back to life on land. I mean, I had to get used to crossing roads again, the blast of a horn I would jump at, bright lights. You know, the pace of life on land is very fast. And we often don't realise it because we're in it every day. You know, even driving a car on a busy motorway.
Yes.
All of that I had to adjust. I hadn't driven a car for 8 months. So, you know, life out at sea, it's slow, as you know, Rosemary. You know, the sound of the wind and the waves, it's very quiet. You come back, there's voices, there's dogs barking. It can be...
Apart from trying to get your sea legs.
Absolutely.
Or get your land legs, I should say.
Yeah.
Now, you and I share the same wonderful agent, Selva Anthony, and hopefully I'm going to interview Selva shortly, which will be great. But how wonderful it was that she got you a deal with HarperCollins, and that now your book is out there for everybody to read about your adventure. It's not only out there in hard copy, it's out there in audio, and you read it. So did you enjoy that, going back reading it, or did you find that a bit hard?
Absolutely. No, I remember the first time they sent me, the copy, the first copy just before, I could distribute it, and holding it in my hands and looking at it thinking, is this even real? You know, I loved reading books growing up. I've always loved writing, and it's just surreal to think that I'm a published author. It's just gone back into another reprint.
Yes.
My Selva just told
wonderful.
me.
Yes.
It just told me. So, the fact that people are out there reading this book, my story, but most importantly, hopefully learning from some of the lessons, I guess, that I learnt myself. So if some of the things that I learnt 500 kilometres out to sea in the middle of the ocean about leaning on your team, being vulnerable, keep going, breaking things down can help someone in their daily life, that's, it's sort of that next layer to it, and that's what really makes me happy. So the whole process of writing a book was a whirlwind. The emotions were still fresh, so the words kind of flowed out on the page, and then you go into the editing process. But it's just been an absolute joy, and Selva is someone I so truly look up to in everything she's done.
She's wonderful, isn't she? To order Bonnie's book, which is The Girl Who Touched the Stars, or to find out more about Bonnie, visit her website, www.bonniehancock.com, or visit your local bookstore who now, I believe, a lot of them have audiobooks as well as hard copy, and pick up a copy of Bonnie's books. But we certainly would, as I say, like to hear more about Gotcha for Life, but we might just have to save that for another day. So Bonnie Hancock, thank you, world record holder, and so much more. Thank you for being my guest today.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.